All right, so we're going to continue this lecture with the Devonian. All right, so we talked about the Devonian a little bit last week with the Devonian extinction, and now we're going to back up just a tiny bit to talk about what was actually going on with life. All right, so again, here is our Devonian. All right, fairly warm time, so high sea levels, not a whole lot of glacial ice. Sorry, taking a sip of water. And there's many shallow seas at this point covering most of the continents. All right, but today we're going to be focusing more on invading the land. Now, which came first, plants or animals? Knowing what you know about life in general, you should be thinking plants came first, right? From what we know, animals use plants. So plants probably had to be the first ones on land. Plants are photosynthetic, meaning they don't need a food source, all right? So they don't have to rely on other living things for the most part. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So what changes will plants have to undergo? So pause this video and think about it for a second. What will plants have to do to go from living in water to living in land? All right, go ahead and pause the video for like 10 seconds. So they're going to have to overcome gravity, right? Water is not nearly as difficult to live in as living on land is. Gravity pushes you down a lot more. Think about when you go swimming in the pool. When you first get out of the pool, you know how your body feels really heavy and weird? That's because gravity affects you much more strongly on land. So when your body's in the water, it's not feeling that gravity. It's going to have to deal with drying out. All right. So obviously, if you're living in the water, you're not really going to dry out that easily. You're going to have to reproduce differently, and you're going to have to obtain nutrients in a different way. So we talked a little bit about land plants already in the Ordovician, but we really don't have a whole lot. We mostly just have a couple spores living near the water. All right. That's about it so far. We do have some algae moving in the Silurian. So this time period goes Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, and then what we're talking about today, Devonian. All right, so we're almost there. So in the Silurian, we have some algae, not a whole lot going on. But living in the water is an excellent place to live. And the reason for that is that the ocean buffers drastic temperature changes. So in the ocean, you're not going to go from like a desert environment where it can be like 120 degrees during the day and freezing at night. That doesn't happen in the ocean. The ocean protects from the sunlight, UV radiation. You always have constant food sources because the currents are always bringing food. And you can't really dehydrate. So all of these things make life really awesome. But we're still going to be making that move to land. So again, here are some challenges to living on land. We have water, buoyancy, how to balance yourself, temperature, nutrients, and UV light. So we're going to talk about most of these things today. So on land, plants are going to develop some new structures to be able to handle this life on land thing. So how do plants get nutrients into their body today? Well, if you're thinking roots, you would be entirely correct. Now, roots play a secondary purpose that are incredibly important too. And that is roots stabilize the plant. So we need that stabilization because living on land is a little bit difficult. If you hear weird rustling noises, those are my dogs. I've tried to calm them down to no avail. My apologies. All right, so combining stabilization and nutrient gathering needs, those are roots. All right, so the first plants to colonize the land were something we're going to call non-vascular. I'm taking... Okay, go play. Sorry, I took my dog's collars off so this wouldn't bother us anymore. Sorry, my life is never quiet. All right, so the first plants to colonize the land were non-vascular, meaning they don't have specialized tissues that carry water nutrients. So vascular, like a vascular doctor, is something studying how your blood is moving from one place to another, right? So these plants don't have stuff inside them that can move water nutrients through them, much like veins carry your blood. All right, and these specialized tissues are called xylem and phloem. Xylem and phloem. Xylem carries water, phloem carries food. And they carry it to the separate parts of the plant. Now, non-vascular plants do not have this. So, a couple types of things that this can include are like liverworts, hornworts, moss. Moss is probably the only group we're really familiar with here. But think about this. If they don't have ways to carry nutrients to the rest of their body, do you think that might express itself in limitations to a non-vascular plant's lifestyle? Of course. So we're going to talk about that. So non-vascular plants can't grow very tall. they have to stay close to the ground. And that's because they really can't transport water in other places. They have to live in water-rich environments. Think about moss. Moss always grows on the shady side of a tree. That's because it needs to be able to keep that water in its body. And they reproduce with spores. And we'll talk about what a spore is in just a second. So, reproduction requires moisture everywhere, in every group that we know, plants, animals, whatever. All right, so this is a picture of a sponge here, and the sponge is in the process of reproducing. So how this is working is it's releasing its gametes and eggs into the water at a set time. The currents pick up those gametes and egg cells, and they carry them. And oftentimes, so this sponge here is releasing gametes, it will meet up somewhere in the water with egg cells and reproduce, right? Those eggs will combine, they will fertilize. This doesn't work on land, right? The wind isn't constant. You can't just squirt out a bunch of gametes into the air and hope for the best. That's not going to end up working out the way you think it will. So we're going to have to come up with different ways of doing this in the plant world, all right? So a spore is a reproductive structure that can grow into an adult plant. It's not the same as a seed, like the seeds that you might plant in a garden or something like that. Those are going to come a little bit later. But spores, I don't need you to know this. I just want you to look at it, all right? So a spore here has what we call an alteration of generations, all right? And what that means is we have a spore that produces a haploid, so half of the genetic code, and then that haploid will produce a diploid, which means the full genetic code, and it will go back and forth and back and forth. So each generation will look wildly different from one another, okay? And again, I don't need you to know exactly how this works. I really just want you to understand that what a spore is, all right? So here is, we have a haploid and a diploid. So that top picture here is the diploid fern. The bottom picture is the haploid fern. This is the same species, and they're both adults, but they look totally different. This is the alternation of generations at work here, okay? This is the same type of fern, onoclea, excuse me. So, non-vascular plants, some of them will start to develop primitive systems for transporting water, which will help them grow a little bit taller. They don't contain what we call lignin, and lignin is true vascular tissue. Lignin is the main component in bark, all right? So you've seen lignin, you've probably touched lignin if you've ever touched a tree bark. So we have a transitional fossil of a non-vascular plant without those tissues and a vascular plant with those tissues. And this is what it looks like, called Cooksonia from the Silurian, all right? And that S and G is has to deal with the spore, alternation of generations, sporophyte and gametophyte, all right? You don't need to know that. But it's considered a transitional form. And I know this doesn't look like much. This just looks like a weird squashed up picture with some lines on it. This is what we think it looked like in real life when it wasn't squashed. So you can see that it's starting to grow a little bit. You see these branches forming. Okay, so when we first started off with vascular tissues, the vascular tissue only made up a tiny portion of the plant. And as you can imagine, if you only had veins in a little bit of your body, this isn't going to be very effective. And it means you're not going to be able to grow very tall, right? You're not going to be able to circulate things through your body. You're not going to be able to do a whole lot. So at first, when this first started, plants were not able to grow very tall. They were not able to process water and nutrients as well. But as time went on, we see that this improved vascular tissue allows plants to strengthen the stem, which is going to allow them to grow taller, and it's going to be able to transport the water and nutrients more efficiently. And if the stem is able to strengthen itself, it's going to be able to combat gravity. Because remember, living on land is not easy, especially in terms of gravity. So plants will increase in height throughout the Devonian. One special note is now that we're moving closer and closer to modern, I'm going to give you a lot of these names that are in italics. These are names of fossils. So this is Archaeopteryx. I don't require that you know the names of these fossils except the ones I tell you specifically. So I will tell you which ones I want you to know, but it's going to be a very small list. So I will never ask you what an Archaeopteryx is, okay? But Archaeopteryx got all the way up to 30 meters, which is about 100 feet, just under. All right, and then here's some lycopods. These are root scars, essentially, what that looks like. So about 150 feet. And the major difference now, okay, so we have non-vascular plants without that xylem of phloem. So we now have plants that can transfer water more efficiently. But spores, the reproductive method of non-vascular plants, require water. So if we want to have trees moving away from constant water sources, maybe putting them in temperate forests where it's not always wet, or even putting them in parts of the desert, we're going to have to move away from spores. And we do. We evolve true seeds. So just like the seeds that you use. All right. So why are seeds useful? Well, think about how long you can keep a pack of vegetable seeds in your drawer, right? Everybody's got a junk drawer in the kitchen, and a lot of times you might have some packets of vegetable seeds in there, right? Lots of parents do. So many seeds have that nutrient inside the shell for the developing plant. The coating on that shell prevents that seed baby from drying out. So in effect, you can have a seed and a baby living inside that seed for a long time, for years, before anything bad happens to it. All right? So if you go through a drought and you still make seeds, your offspring won't necessarily die. They can survive for a long time. They can wait till water happens. So this is going to allow for greater distribution. Okay? So seeds, you can scatter them. They don't necessarily have to be planted right away. The wind can pick them up and carry them. Another way that seeds can do this actually is birds will eat seeds and berries and things like that, and they will actually poop out the seeds, right? So raspberry and blackberries, that's actually what they're designed to do. All right, so, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to change the slide there. Raspberries and blackberries, the birds eat them, and the seeds are hard to break down. So they will actually get rid of them when they're flying, right? And those seeds will actually be planted wherever the bird pooped them out. So that is an evolutionary adaptation to be spread further. So as you can imagine, now if we're able to move these plants away from water, well, we're able to expand them to a number of different continents. So we're going to start to see tons of plants spreading across land masses that were previously deserted by organisms. And what do you think the isotope record will say about this? Think about that. We'll go back to it. Right, so this is just a distribution graph showing how common these plants are. So you see the seed plants taking off in the Devonian. Seed plants are right at the end of this graph to the right. And you see that they spread quickly, much more quickly than other groups of plants. All right. So, well, now that plants are on land, animals are coming soon. All right. So animals will start to come. So what challenges do animals face on land? Think about it. If you were coming onto land for the first time, what would you need? You would need a way to get over gravity. You need a way to prevent water loss. You would need a new way to reproduce, right? Fish lay eggs in the water, and other fish will come fertilize them later. Not going to work so well. We need to find ways to eat, find food. We need to find ways to see. Your eyes don't really work underwater, and fish eyes don't really work on land. We need hearing, smelling. All these things have to change at some point. All right? So arthropods were among the first animals to invade the land. And arthropods are that group that includes spiders, insects, crabs, crustaceans, things like that. All right, so we have our first trace fossil showing up at about 450 million years ago. Our first body fossils show up about 420. Trace fossils show that arthropods were living there. Even if we don't have the actual definitive bodies of it, we see things like little trackways, little footprints of sorts, if you will. All right, so arthropods, one of the reasons that they were so successful at getting onto land and why they were the first is because they had a number of features that already let them be successful on land. So it's kind of hard to imagine this, but a lot of people have problems with the idea that fish became humans, right? And I know it's a terrible way to describe evolution, but that's what a lot of people have in their head, that fish just crawled on the land one day and all of a sudden, boom, they evolved lungs and they could breathe. That's not how any of this works. We're talking about very slow incremental change, and a lot of the times, the features that would allow these creatures to live on land evolved long before they actually lived on land. We'll talk about what that means here in a second. But arthropods have an external coating already. They're exoskeletons. Remember the trilobites and how they grow? They grow by molting. So that's their exoskeleton. And that exoskeleton prevents them from drying out. And it gives them gravitational support. And this is much easier for the smaller creatures. All right, so most arthropods are pretty tiny. The larger you are, the rougher gravity is, right? Gravity is very rough on our bodies, just like an elephant's, just like a dinosaur's. All right? So this is going to be what we call an exaptation. This is going to come up a bunch of times. You should know it. An exaptation is a structure that's evolved for one function, and then it's used for another. So an example of this is birds. Birds did not get their feathers for flight. Birds evolved their feathers for warmth. But we all know now that birds use their feathers to fly. An example that someone gave me in class that doesn't have anything to do with science is that they bought their PlayStation 4 to play video games, and now they exapted it to watch Netflix. So you use it for one function and then use it for another instead. So one exception of the arthropods outside of their exoskeleton is that they have something called book lungs. So book lungs, just like their name suggests, look like pages of a book. And they're evolved from structures that used to be essentially modified legs, right? So how this worked is, think of a spider with a bunch more legs than 8, all right? This isn't the best way to describe it, but it's kind of hard to do it over a microphone here. But some of those kind of moved in, curled in under the spider's body, and eventually were formed into a part of the lungs. And we have fossil evidence to support that idea. But those flap-like structures have gas exchange across them, all right? So they're working kind of like gills. So book lungs must remain moist to function. And they connect to the air outside by holes. So spiders have book lungs, and how this is working is if you have a drop of moisture in it, these things can work. They can work underwater, and they can work on land. No big deal, all right? One moment. All right. So another note to make is insects aren't exactly known for their great use of oxygen. Most insects aren't that large today. So if you can't process oxygen very well, you can't grow very large. Imagine with me that none of us humans could breathe in oxygen very well to a point where we could get oxygenated blood all throughout our body. Well, if that was the case, we couldn't grow very tall now, could we? So insects remain very small. This is something that we learned about in the Ediacaran. Remember that surface area and volume problem? They're controlling how large we can grow. If there's not a lot of oxygen, you can't increase your volume. And if you can't increase your volume, you're not increasing your area. So I just said insects can't grow very tall. So clearly I've lied to you at some point, right? Exactly. Look at this dragonfly. It is like human size. This is a 6-foot tall person. And here is a dragonfly that could probably take it down. All right, so how the heck do we have this giant dragonfly? Well, let's talk about what's happening here. This is a graph of carbon-13. And remember, carbon-13 is the leftover residue in plants after photosynthetic processes. So plants use up the C12, they leave behind the C13. When the plant dies, that C13 is broken down in the dead plant material. So in times of high C13, we know there's high photosynthesis. And if there's more photosynthesis, we know there's more oxygen being produced because that's what photosynthesis makes. So take a look here at just about 355 million years ago. Do you see that massive increase in carbon-13? That is due to plants evolving. Trees specifically. These large 150-foot trees are producing so much oxygen. All right? So during that time, insects were actually able to grow very large. And hopefully you're seeing by the hint at the bottom, wouldn't this be a fun test question? I would guess you'd have to explain what's happening. So we now have so much carbon-13 and we're burying it, which is how we're seeing this graph. This graph is made because we're burying that carbon-13 into the rock record. Okay? So we just talked about this, but what major biological change have we just witnessed? The evolution of trees. All right? And it's now being buried at a really high rate, which means we have a ton of oxygen being released and a large amount of CO2 being taken out of the atmosphere. But how is it being buried? When we talked about this during the Great Oxygenation Event, we talked about it happening with plate tectonics, right? So being buried in the ocean. Well, trees don't live in the ocean, so it's going to have to happen a different way. So let's take a look at Florida. Florida is a swampland. If you take a look at your trees next time in the swamps, you see that there are dead trees laying down, and you see that there's living trees growing on top of it. Well, that cycle continues for hundreds and thousands of millions of years. We just have trees after trees after trees. So how we're burying this is actually just by growing new trees on top of the dead trees. It's slowly burying all of that carbon. And in fact, this is where most of our coal comes from. Almost all of our coal really comes from this time period, right where we have lots of trees first evolving. All right. So that's where our coal comes from. It takes millions and millions of years to make. It is not a renewable resource. All right. So I'm going to stop here for now. I'm going to put the next video up in just a little bit. But that was the first bit of that lecture. That was what we did on one class day.